Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. The link is in the show notes. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Just me on the show this week. I'm going to stop talking about AI for a little bit. Can't promise it's forever, but we're going to talk about some Ford programming challenges that we have run into, and you might have as well. If not, maybe you will in the future. Some important information that you're going to want to know going into doing Ford programming for replacement modules. So if you are familiar with programming modules on Ford, Lincoln, Mercury vehicles, not too many of the Mercurys left out there, but they are out there. If you program modules on these vehicles, you'll be familiar with a lot of the things that I'm talking about here. I am going to do just a real quick clarification on some of the terminology and acronyms that I'll be using throughout this. So again, if you're familiar with Ford stuff, you can probably skip a few minutes here rather than listen to this. But if you're not, if you've never programmed a Ford before, and I'm going to throw a bunch of acronyms out there as we go, you're going to be like, what is he talking about? And this is not a class on how to program a Ford. There's plenty of material out there. Like, go take one of Keith Perkins' classes on his website. And there's other stuff out there too. But I am going to use those terms while I'm talking about the challenge that we're dealing with on these vehicles. But anyways, let's just go through them real quick. So when I talk about IDS, that's Integrated Diagnostic System, that is the programming and diagnostic platform that Ford has used from 1996 to roughly 2018. Now, there was a transition starting in 18 on some models where they went to FDRS, which is Ford Diagnostic and Repair System. And that is it's like legacy versus the current platform. Like, everything made in 2025 is going to be FDRS, but then starting in 18, there was a transition period. I think up to 21, if I remember correctly. I should have that in front of me because I'm talking about this, but again, this isn't a Ford programming class. But what I'm going with here is there are some vehicles in 2018, like Expedition, that is going to be FDRS, but there are some vehicles in 2018, like an F-150, that is still going to be IDS. So they phased in the vehicle platforms to the new diagnostic and programming platform. Now, the nice part is, besides the interactions that you'll have with the software itself, the way these modules are programmed, like the basic format of what you're doing, it doesn't change that much. It's just the screens look different and you find the things different places in the software. That's really about it, but you're still going to be doing the same thing. And we run into the same challenge, regardless if it's IDS or FDRS. Now, just for clarification on the terms, there is an FJDS, which is for J2534 diagnostic system. And this was pre-FDRS. And this was the J2534 platform. You could do powertrain modules and security related features when it came to those powertrain related modules, right? If you replace a PCM, it houses the keys, or you have to do a parameter reset. It gives you those functions, and that's pretty much it. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't used it personally since probably 2018, but it was the short-term version. If you want to use a JBox and you don't want to buy, the long-term IDS for the whole year, but because of the reasonable price of Ford, I just went with the full year. Now, I should also note they recently changed their subscription model just within the last month. It used to be a license key that you bought, and then you had to use that for the laptop that you were going to program with. Now it is a login style. Where you use your username and password. And according to what they say, you can use up to 3 laptops concurrently, so you don't need that license key anymore. Our license key extends out past like right now in October of 25. So I haven't actually transitioned to this new method yet. We will eventually, and we'll see. I'm sure there'll be some challenges with that. I did read somewhere on Facebook that they're watching the logins to make sure that it's not happening in different states, right? So if you live and work and buy the subscription in Minnesota, and then they see that login being used in Florida, they can, pretty safely assume that you're sharing your login with somebody, which they're obviously going to try to avoid. So be aware of that. Again, not the scope of this class because I haven't even transitioned to the new method yet, but that is what they're doing with the login for the full-on FDRS IDS package. Now, you buy that year package and you do get both. You get IDS for the older platform vehicles, and you get FDRS access with the same subscription. So it's not like some manufacturers where you would potentially have to buy 2 separate subscriptions, or the one I can think of is Nissan. I think the more expensive subscription for Nissan, you get console 4 and 3, but then you can buy one with just 3. Anyways, I'm getting off into the weeds there like I usually do. But anyways, back to Ford, just a couple more terms, and then we'll get into this here, what I'm actually talking about today. I'll talk about PMI, that's programmable module installation. That is essentially the process you go through to program a replacement control module. And that's going to do programming and it's going to do coding. Now, the coding portion of it through Ford is traditionally listed as built data or as built coding. And you'll see this listed as configuration during the PMI process, and even in FDRS software listed as configuration rather than as-built data, but in the IDS platform, that's what you'll see it listed as built. So what do we mean by as-built? The as-built data is, again, the coding for that module. What is coding? Coding is the options that vehicle has, and you're telling the module, hey, it has LED taillights. It has adaptive cruise control. It has dually rear wheels, right? There's hundreds, probably thousands of different options. It all depends on the module. And when they make a vehicle, right, especially like a pickup truck, for instance, there are a ton of different build options for that vehicle, but they're going to make the same control module in a lot of cases, like an instrument cluster, for instance, that's going to be used across the platform, regardless of the specific options that were built onto that vehicle. And so the coding is stuff that module is capable of across the board, right? Every single Ford F-150 that they put that cluster into, each one had 100 different options, and each cluster is set up to potentially operate any of those 100 different options. But you have to tell it which one it's equipped with to either turn on or off or configure those options correctly for that vehicle. That's what as-built data or coding is. And coding is used in other modules on other makes, but for Ford, that's what it's called. Now, we can get into the problem that myself and many others have run into. I wouldn't even say recently. This has been going on for quite some time, just about as long as I've been programming. I can remember instances like this where the as-built data for a particular vehicle on Ford's server, and we'll talk about that, is incorrect, meaning it's either missing or it's wrong for the given vehicle that we are trying to pull that as-built data from. Okay, so let me give you an instance here. We replace an ABS control module on a vehicle. Okay, so we get a call, say, hey, we put an ABS control module in this car. We go to the car and we either decide to run a PMI, which is the usual process, because a PMI, programmable module installation, is generally going to run the programming if the module requires it, and not all of them do. Some of them just need the as-built data. But if it needs programming, it's going to put the software into the module that it requires, and then it's going to run the configuration. And again, you'll see that on the screen. That's what it's doing. The configuration is the coding, setting up the options, and it's using the data on the server for that VIN number. Okay. And so it pulls it from Ford's server. It looks up the VIN, says, okay, this is the coding that's supposed to go into this module. But what can happen, and what does happen, is that data, again, is wrong or missing on the Ford server. So then when the tool goes to pull it and it's putting in or trying to put in the data, it's either you're going to have faults after the fact or it's just going to air out in general. Depends on the situation. That's definitely why you want to check for codes before the vehicle's sent out. But even then, we've had issues where, it doesn't code until the vehicle's driven. So it can be a hassle here, which is kind of why I'm talking about it. It's been a frustrating thing for us to anticipate and deal with as it pops up. But the fact of the matter is the data that it's pulling from Ford's server is incorrect for that vehicle. Now, ideally, when you do a PMI, or even just doing as-built coding, you're supposed to start with the original module plugged into the vehicle, and Ford software, if you haven't entered the secret password, will pull the data out of the module, save it, and then it will push it into the new module. So in that case, it may not necessarily be pulling information from Ford's server if you have pulled it out of the original module. And there's all kinds of different module programming on Fords. Some vehicles, some modules, it makes a lot of sense to start with the original. If we're doing a PCM, for instance, you can save yourself a ton of time. Like, you don't have to find the solenoid strategy for transmission if you start with the original, because it pulls it out of there and puts it into the new one. And Ford, it does ask you in the software of like, hey, are you starting with the original or not? Or is the original plugged in? You can say yes or no. And there's various ways of programming use control modules here. But anyways, you could pull it off of the original and you can rely on the Ford software to put it into the new one. But what if you don't have the original? What if the original's a no communication? These things happen. And we run into this quite often going into shops where they'll call us up for a control module programming, and we've tried to train some of our more regular customers, like, save the original module. That's always our default. Doesn't matter what it is, even if I need it or not. There have been so many situations over the years of just like, save the old module, please, for the love of God, save the old module. It makes our lives so much easier. If there's something that goes wrong, if the factory software doesn't work that day, if Ford is missing data on their server, having that original makes things way easier. But often it is not available. They've already sent it back. They don't know what happened to it. The parts store can't get it back because it's already been sent back on the truck to the remanufacturer. The module just might be a no-com, right? Physically damaged, whatever. And so you can't get data out of it. And so you have to rely on what is on Ford's server in order to finish that programming/coding. Now, you can rely on the tool to pull that information from the server. If you have a current account, it's going to do that. or you can go right to the website yourself and see the coding. Now, this is helpful, but it's not much different than the tool doing it, because when you do this, and here's how you do this, you go to motorcraftservice.com and then you go to quick guides and then module as built data. You don't even have to log in for this. You do have to put a VIN number and fill out a CAPTCHA, but you don't even have to log in. This is all free, no account necessary, and you can get the coding that is for that VIN. But here's why this is helpful, because you can prove to yourself, and I'll explain where you would use this information to help get the data changed, but you could prove to yourself that, like, hey, the data in this module does not match what it's trying to put in. And what I mean by that is the amount of blocks of coding, which is just a section of either 4 or 2 numbers that are going to be in hexadecimal code, they don't match. The amount of data that we're trying to put in to the module, or sometimes it is just the data itself, but usually where I see issues is the amount of codes. Like, and I realize you're listening to this audio only, so just think of if a module had 8 digits of code that I was supposed to be putting into it, but the coding that is stored on Ford's server is only 4 digits long, that's not going to work, right? We're only pulling 4 digits. What about the other 4? What is the IDS software or FDRS software going to use if it's not complete on the server side? And again, you can go to the website and you can see, okay, this is what it's trying to put in. Now, the next part is, well, how do I know what's in the module itself? Now, there is a way you can manually enter the coding through IDS, but my preferred method, and this is the way that I would suggest going to, is using a tool called Forscan, the most hilarious, or it's up there on the most hilarious scan tool name. I think there's a Volkswagen one that's up there too. But anyways, it's Russian made, so you got to go out and find out how to get a license. There's been some issues with the sanctions and stuff. You can figure it out if you're persistent enough. And Forscan has been a really useful tool. It's more user-friendly for doing this type of work, and it's been really helpful for us to identify that, like, hey, that's what's in this particular module, but it needs to be this, all right? Or this is what's in this particular module, but Ford is trying to put this in based off of what the server's data says, okay? Now, what Forscan allows you to do, this show is brought to you by Automotive Seminars. If you're looking to stay up on the cutting edge diagnostic strategies and techniques, this is the place. You've got live 4-hour seminars that are put online that you can join in, ask questions, interact with the instructors, with some of the best of the best. They've got Keith Perkins and John Thornton putting on classes like network diagnostics, mechanical engine testing, advanced electrical testing, and GDI diagnostics, and a ton more. And once you purchase one of these training seminars, you can access this at any time that you want through your account at automotiveseminars.com. You can rewatch the training a year, 2 years later, which makes this training even more valuable. So I highly recommend you check this out. The link is in the show notes. Gives you an easier path towards clearly seeing not only what the as-built data is, but the configuration, the amount of blocks, right? Is it 4 digits or is it 8 digits? And on some modules, like a body control module, like we're talking of hundreds and hundreds of lines of code that are going into this thing. We just went through this on a 20-something Ford Ranger, where it was just pages and pages of code. But you could see all of it. Like, you're connecting to the module on the car, and it's spitting it out for you. Now, not only can you see it, you can edit it if you want. That gets fun if you don't exactly know what you're doing. You can definitely mess some stuff up. But here's the thing, you can save that, and I recommend you save it before you start changing anything if this is your first time going through. But you can save that data. Why is this important? Well, number one, if you're changing stuff, you can always go back. But you could save that out of the original module and then put it into the new one. You could save whatever coding comes in that module from wherever it came from before you change it with what's on Ford's server. And what you can do is you can load that server data right from Ford server onto Forscan, and then you can write it right through the software there. And it's going to pull it from the server just like Ford did. So if the data is wrong, it's going to put the wrong data in. And it'll actually give you a warning. It'll say the amount of blocks does not match. And that's a good sign. I have it at a couple instances where it works anyways. I don't have the exact explanation as to why, but usually when it says that, that means the data on Ford server is wrong, or potentially you have the wrong part, and you should consider that. That's a challenge that we're going through on a vehicle right now. It's like, is this the wrong part, or is Ford's server data wrong? We don't have the original, so it gets kind of tough to tell. We're trying to do a parts number thing here to prove it out. But anyways, I shouldn't say it's besides the point because it's all part of this. The fact that Ford's server data can be wrong makes us question what we're doing, right? Us as the programmers coming in, trying to shove in the wrong data to their new power steering module that they put in. Like that's on us to be able to identify and then take the proper methods to correct if we can. But it could also just be a wrong part. And if it wasn't for Ford being wrong on a regular basis with what they have saved on their server, I wouldn't even consider it. I'd just be like, yes, this is the wrong part. But then also, please, for the love of God, save the old module. I need it. And the job would have been done a long time ago, or at least we could have said one way or another, like, yep, this is the wrong part because here's the data in this one, here's the data in that one. Anyways, Forscan is allowing you to see this in a lot more clarity. Manipulate it if you need to in different ways, save it, and then again you can pull right from the Ford server, you can type it in manually. Forscan has some other stuff too where number one, there's forums where people have decoded this and they've made spreadsheets. So if you want to do certain things like turn on a remote start, it'll tell you what block to change to what to activate remote start in that F-150. There's also within the software configuration built in where it translates that coding data for you. So you don't even have to worry about the coding. You just say, yeah, enable remote start or disable remote start with a click of a button and writing it to the module. Again, we're just turning on and off different options that one was equipped with. All right, so to the heart of this issue, what do you do if you have confirmed that the data on Ford server is wrong and you don't have the original module to pull from? Because that would be the easy fix is, well, let's just pull it from there and put it into that one. And we're done and we don't have to worry about Ford server. The path to fix this is filing an SIR with NASTIF, which is done through diag.net. So you have to have an account there, and at least I think you have to have an account there. I have an account, so I guess I'm not 100% sure whether you do or not, but you go to diag.net and you search the NASTIF SIRs, and then you fill out a lack of information request, right? You're actually posting, but within a specific section on diag.net. Now, this does require, number one, that you fill out the correct amount of information, like get some screenshots, get some data. Here's what's on the server. Here's what's in mine. Here's the VIN number. Here's what we tried. We were using this tool. You're also supposed to reach out to Ford before you take this path. I'll tell you, reaching out to Ford is usually pointless in my personal experience. Hey, if you're out there and you work for Ford, get a hold of me. My email's in the show notes. You can find me on Facebook. I'm sure you'll find me some other way too. I would love to have a chat. I'd love to have you on the show. Let's talk about it. Why is all of the data on this server wrong? Now, I shouldn't say all, but it's frequent enough where I'm suspect when I'm going out to program a Ford, like, hey, is this data going to be wrong? Boy, I sure hope we have the original module in case this data is incorrect. Even when you do have the original, we ran into a BCM on a Ranger not that long ago where we were just doing the configuration on the BCM for another reason, and this was just the existing BCM. Well, turns out the data on the server is completely wrong, and this vehicle was disabled after we ran this configuration. No going back, because we did it with FDRS, and we did not save any coding beforehand. That wasn't part of our process on that particular vehicle, but sure is now. But it took a week for Ford to fix it, which they did by following that path, by filing the SIR with NASTIF. And then they get a hold of the people at Ford, say like, hey, here's the problem. Here's this VIN number. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what's in the car. Here's what's on the server. And then they correct it. You go back once they give the thumbs up, and it works fine, which it did. So, I mean, thumbs up to them that they can actually get in there and they can correct it per VIN. Do they go beyond that and fix other VINs of similar makes and models? I have no idea. That'd be nice if they did, but I don't know what actually happens on the back end there. Again, be real curious if you work at Ford, and you can fill me in on that. But I wanted to just share this with everybody because Fords are very common. The programming on them is very common. You may have run into this before. If you've got another workaround, I mean, let me know. One of the things that we're trying to do now, we've just recently started this, is trying to save that as-built coding on modules through Forscan so that we have some built-up files. Now, is this Ford Edge going to work on another Ford Edge? Again, that's tough to say, but in some cases, like a power steering control module for a Ford Explorer, it's the same number across a number of years. So if you had a saved file, you might be able to use that on the next one, even if the server data is incorrect. Now you've got a stored file. You know, that's not fixing the problem. It's just maybe creating a stopgap at certain points if you're lucky. It would just be nice if the data was correct, but you know, I get it. It's a lot, and things are going to happen, and there's going to be mistakes, but being aware of it is the first thing, which is why I'm doing this. So you can be aware if you're going into Fords and you get some configuration errors, you get some failures, get some weird stuff after you've programmed and configured or wrote the as-built data of the module. That data might be incorrect, but do your legwork to make sure that, again, you have the correct part in there, you've used the correct tooling. You can go to that Ford website, motorcraftservice.com, check that data yourself. Look at the data that's in the module if you have that capability. Again, Forscan's great for that. There is a manual way that you can enter coding with IDS, but verify the best you can that, okay, hey, yes, this data is incorrect. It's a little bit of a process, and you know, the car, if it's a critical module, the car is going to be down for that period of time while you're waiting for Ford to fix it, but that's the known path right now. So I wanted to share that with everybody. If anybody's got any better solutions, quicker solutions, you got any ideas or thoughts on that, don't hesitate to reach out, and I'd be happy to talk about it with you. So that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Let's all get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.